I'm here with Laurel Krause, and if you could just introduce yourself to people who may not be aware of who you are, go ahead and take the floor.
Okay, I'm Laurel Krause. I'm here today at the Allison Center for Peace. I created it for my sister Allison, who was one of 4 students that was killed at Kent State. That was May 4th, 1970. Today is May 5th. So I'm recovering from a very good 49th. It was good because we got a lot of truth out this year, and there was a lot of really good healing sentiment. It's been a wound in America, Kent State, that's never been addressed correctly. And a whole generation of people, me included, have had to bear the wound without any help, without any healing, and the government wishes to not help us heal because they like this post-traumatic stress place they've put us in with the whole generation, the Vietnam generation, baby boomers. A lot of people still care about Kent State that are beyond those days, that have learned about it, that care about human rights, that care about police and law enforcement and the military shooting indiscriminately at protesters especially. And that's where we really focus our energy on. It's about the protection of protesters, because my sister Allison was protesting at the time that the US government shot her dead. She was 343 feet from her shooters. And we've since taken this to the United Nations. In 2014, we learned that my sister was targeted, assassinated by the Ohio National Guard. And this was at the US 4th Periodic Review. We applied for that, we got in, and the US 5th Periodic Review has just been slated. We applied and we got in. So this will be happening probably in 2020, 2021. It takes a long time for UN things, but I'll be going back to Geneva and standing for my sister and for the right of all protesters in America. Now, we formed the Kent State Truth Tribunal in 2010, the 40th anniversary year. Right now we're at the 49th, and we're getting ready to go into the 50th, which will be the last hurrah, because most of the people that were at Kent State that really care about it are either dead or dying or disabled or whatever. They're in their 70s. It's very challenging when it's 50 years later. So basically, we formed the Kent State Truth Tribunal to record the stories of original participants and witnesses of the May 4th, 1970 event. And we filmed them 40 years after the event. And this was done with Emily Eigner Kunstler, who's the daughter of the very celebrated radical lawyer William Kunstler, who was a freedom fighter for Attica, for Wounded Knee, for a lot of Kent State people, and many other radical lawsuits. He was a Chicago 8 person, lawyer as well. His daughter, Emily, is my partner and she helped me co-found the Kent State Truth Tribunal. What we're wanting to do in this 49th year is bring the voices of all those people to the internet through their testimonials and have it be searchable if possible, and share the people's history of Kent State, because my teacher in college was Howard Zinn. I studied with him for 3 years at Boston University, and just before he passed, he told me that the Kent State Truth Tribunal was the way to go, and that I must always continue to search for peace, search for truth, and therefore peace.
I had no idea he was your professor. That is like, I have no words.
He's a good friend too. I mean, I met him when I was 21, when I was 19. Mm-hmm. So he remained my friend until he passed. And that was just in 2010. And we talked, I invited him to participate at the Kent State Truth Tribunal, and he said he wasn't going to be able to make it. And 2 weeks later, he died. So I'm not sure if it was foreshadowing or whether he had a really busy schedule. I have a feeling it's the latter.
Yeah. So you mentioned yesterday was the 49th anniversary of the Kent State Massacre. Can you, I know you explained the history of that, but you wanted to highlight more about what exactly transpired, what happened, or do you feel like you already covered that enough?
Oh, I didn't cover it at all. What happened was a government event. It was a military exercise on the campus at noon on May 4th, 1970. Students were changing classes. It was a gorgeous, brilliant day, and they had thousands of military personnel with their half trackers and all their war regalia that they were wearing, with military war weapons, M1s, and bayonets and the whole thing, and they're marching around campus, and they're terrorized. It was an occupation that started the Friday before. May 4th was a Monday. Over the weekend, there was interaction with students. The ROTC building was burned down by protesters, but we realized it's never been fully investigated. And there's a lot of evidence that shows FBI involvement in that. FBI was very involved in this. And at that time, they had a covert army called Cointelpro.
Yes.
And Cointelpro was really active going against the Black Panthers. They were instrumental and instigated the killing of Fred Hampton. That was just months, like less than a year before my sister's killing. And they were very involved in suppressing the New Left. And the New Left were student protesters. They had the perception, they promoted the perception across the media, and the media was lapdog at that point. They just took whatever they got. That all the students on campus were communists. We have to fight the communists. And my sister was not a communist. I mean, she was a protester, and she got killed by her government. She was targeted, assassinated by COINTELPRO. They had an elaborate plot related to a government informant, FBI informant, provocateur. It seems anyone that mentions that person's name at Kent State University is called a conspiracy theorist, as I have been called. How could I possibly be a conspiracy theorist? My sister died there. I witnessed cleaning out her dormitory room. I lived through this. I was 15 when it happened. So my sister was 19. She was my only sibling. So my parents and I, we had to deal with all this, and we saw what the government did to us. And basically they killed my sister, the FBI, COINTELPRO, and then they came after us because we wanted the truth about it. And it's been going on for 49 years without hesitation, without any type of, consideration that maybe the people want to know the truth about it. Because the biggest secret about Kent State is it was FBI, and they will not allow that to be known.
Wow. Yeah, because I knew about the military shooting, but I wasn't aware of the FBI involvement. So that's really prudent information to know, to put it in context.
Yes. And they're, this is what they do, and they continue to do it. And from Kent State, they learned that they can actually really incapacitate a whole generation by doing things like this, where they just pick off a few people, and those people can represent anyone that was there. So everyone feels that pain and carries that, that when a government kills its citizens, it's not just an act that happens and people die. That is actually it's an emotional response people feel to that. Citizens feel, they feel it could have been them. There's a song that Holly Near wrote for Kent State. It's called It Could Have Been Me. Everyone should hear that song, because any of these events that happen that are government organized, where they have a whole other story about what happened really. But whenever they're doing these Black Flag or whatever these events are, they don't want to share the truth, and they like it how the people react afterwards, because we become unempowered. It becomes harder for us to get on with our lives and to make sense of what happened. And the lives filled with that, our government likes that.
Exactly. I personally know of plenty of protesters just from my generation alone, even new people who came in through Occupy, who carry that trauma. And even though they feel passionate about many causes, just experiencing one level of like state violence, even if it's just being barricaded inside, like being corralled during a march.
Kettling, right?
Yeah, kettling. Yeah. It lives with them like onward. And some of them have post-traumatic stress disorder, and that makes them less active in the streets. Now they are doing other things, but they've, in a way, you're right. It's a way to neutralize a lot of actions.
It neutralizes the masses and anyone that wishes to dissent. If you're gonna, if you want to dissent, you're taking your life in your hands. Do you really want to do that for the cause? Is it that important to you?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the stuff is like that Allison was just walking across campus and whatever. No, she was protesting. And in my world, she knew what she was putting down on the line. She knew that she might die, and she had made that decision. And they won't allow her legacy to be known, which just drives us crazy. But what can you say? I mean, the media is not my friend.
Yeah, disinformation. Yeah, that's another tough hurdle to get across.
Yeah, when you don't have the mic, forget about it.
Mm-hmm. One of the reasons why I wanted to bring you on to this live stream was because, I have some questions relating it to current events. So given the history of state violence done against nonviolent protesters, what is your opinion on activists who still try to involve law enforcement participation? Well,
who are those people?
Yeah, I can explain. So, for example, recently, the Venezuelan Embassy Protection Collective called upon the United States Secret Service.
Oh, yeah, I agree with that. Okay, I heard a little bit about this story. I heard that a couple of, and I could be wrong, and I went to look it up after you and I agreed to talk and try to get, really educated on this, but there's very little information about the Venezuela occupation thing, embassy occupation going on, etc. But I did notice across my threads yesterday that while I was doing all the 49th stuff, that two protesters from Code Pink had been assaulted the night before when they tried to take some food into the embassy for their comrades that were in there, so that they could eat, because they couldn't go out and they wanted to keep hold of the embassy from it being overtaken by Giarda. How do you say the name? Giarda?
I can't pronounce it. Oh. I call them bigoted thugs of the oppositional far right.
Giarda, something like that, or whatever. Yeah. Anyhow, so what happened is, so when I looked at that, and you had asked me this question, how does Kent State compare to Venezuela? The only way that I can see any comparison, like a link of a meaningful link, is that when the secret police or whoever it was that stopped them from entering and arrested them and said that they were like using missiles to attack them. Was it with loaves of bread or what? I mean, anyhow, they should not have done that. The rules are such that our law enforcement is supposed to serve and protect. Even, even social, whatever the forces were that were there at the embassy. What was it? Secret. It wasn't the secret police. It was who was it that? I think it was like the White House people. Who guards the president? Who are those people?
Oh, Secret Service.
Secret Service. I read that it was Secret Service.
Okay.
That's what I read. And so
it might have been a mix between Secret Service and the DC police. I'm
sure that they had everyone way outnumbered and that they were very militaristic because that's how they do this stuff. They have to scare dissent away. But the right to occupy and to assemble and to protest must not be denied by the very people that are supposed to serve and protect us. So that's my point. I mean, but do our law enforcement and military follow orders? No. Do they, or rules? No. So we have rogue agencies now. And they're being encouraged to be more and more rogue every minute by our POTUS and everyone else. Like, whatever you want to do, we'll pardon you. I mean, that kind of comment, just only feeds this problem even more. So when that woman was going in and wanting to deliver her groceries into the occupied Venezuela embassy, she had a right to do that, and they should never have arrested her for that. And then she got attacked on top of it. She got hurt. I heard that there was actual assault going on. Now, I think this is a real good lawsuit. I'm not a lawyer, but it seems to me that, it's a really good point that can be made if there's some real sticking points here. You have to have really good sticking points, I've learned from Kent State. But if they had some really good sticking points, they could really make change with this. Because that's how change happens. It's in legislation from Congress, and it's the courts.
Did you hear about the other person who also got arrested? They were trying to deliver toothbrushes, of all things, and the same thing happened. They were jumped by the opposition, like physically assaulted, and then they were arrested. Yes. And the opposition got off free, while the protester they weren't.
It would be nice to see the payoffs on this and who got paid to do what, because these people are out there. They're maybe getting, it's their third shift. They're not really on duty necessarily. There's a lot of stuff that goes on like this. They're not allowed to do what they did, but they're doing whatever they want. And that's kind of how it was with my sister. They killed her and they did whatever they want. And if they could get me, boy, they would too. That's how that works. They got to shut people up and stop them and make them examples and screw the situation up so that no one really can see it clearly.
Do you think going through that process of having a lawsuit, I know that is important, but given how slow the court system is that the most prudent action that protesters can take right now to have some reconciliation?
What are you going to do? I mean, you're going to protest. It's it might take time. That's why I say they have to have sticking points. If they don't have sticking points, real important issues that are like black and white, this happened, this should not have happened, then it's not worth pursuing. You have to do it case by case, I would think. My father fought all the Kent State lawsuits for 9 years. Wow, he ended up having to take it to the United States Supreme Court to get the right to sue Ohio. That was 4 years later when we were given that right. So then you start all over. 4 years later, everything's cooled off. Everyone's really kind of moved on to stuff. And that's another reason. It's your point that you say it takes forever, whatever. But you still have to do it if it's an important point. Kent State was worth it. You had to do that. I don't know about this situation, but if their lawyers think that they have really good points, they have really good positions, absolutely.
I mean, because it would be defending our free speech and right to assemble.
Yes.
And that is very important under the Constitution.
And it's not protected. And protesters are not protected. I've written an article about that. It's called Honor Thy Protesters. It's at my blog, which is at WordPress. You can Google Mendo Coast Current. I wrote this for my sister a couple years ago when Kendall, one of the Kardashian, the daughter of, anyhow, she did a Pepsi commercial, and it was a protest Pepsi commercial.
Oh, I remember that commercial, yeah.
Right. And that, when I saw that commercial where how she opened up a can of Pepsi and she handed it to the police officer who didn't have a gun, of course, she handed it to him and he accepted it and everything was fine because he drank Pepsi. And Martin Luther King's daughter said, "Oh, my dad should have had some Pepsi with him." She tweeted it out right after that. And I watched it and I went, oh my God, what are they trying to do? Get people to protest so that they'll get killed? I mean, it's there's no protection for protesters in America, and it's getting worse. And my sister's a shining example of that. And no one's even allowed to know that she was a protester and she got killed while she was protesting. Kind of crazy.
I think mixing the disinformation with the propaganda that they put out, like the commercial, has that intent to further silence people who want to air the truth out to the public.
Well, that commercial was trashed and immediately taken off. It didn't show for more than like 20 minutes. It was gone immediately.
Yeah, because of the outcry. Yeah.
And Pepsi did one just like that back in 1970. I'd like to give the world a there's that song, and they did a Pepsi commercial they did a Coca-Cola commercial on that. And they do these commercials for a reason. They're doing them because they want to, to sugarcoat it for the masses. Does it give them more targets, I ask? Does, what is behind it? It needs to be taken a look at, but my goodness, I mean, try to get a mandate for that, no one is really examining, why are they doing these horrible protest commercials that are painting a picture of protest that is absolutely untrue. It is a dangerous thing to do in America, to protest. You put your life on the line if you protest on certain issues and causes. And it's a brave act to protest. But in the eyes of the police and law enforcement in general, and our military, when they're sent in there, they're sent to kill. And I hope to God that it doesn't continue to go toward this trajectory, because I've seen it before.
Yeah. And I mean, I just wanted to reiterate the question, though. Since people did call upon the Secret Service to hold them accountable, because, this is documenting for history
Yes.
that the Secret Service, which side they're on. But in doing that, should activists put any importance on that, or is this?
I mean, who do we have to ask? Who did the Secret Service report to?
Trump.
They're also, I bet a lot of them were off duty doing making money on the side. That happens all the time in this array. So do you want to call the police? I wouldn't.
Yeah, that's my stance. I wouldn't. But I mean,
in my world, the police has never been on our side. I remember my mother sent a letter there was a threatening letter that we received that had things in it like, do you ever put a key in the ignition of your car and think it might blow up? I mean, this is what we received at our house 2 years after Allison was killed. Do you ever, go into your office building and suspect that the heater might be turned, the pilot light might be turned off? I mean, it's meant to chill for sure. So she received this letter, and it was supposedly from a neighbor, and it was threatening us about why we didn't take the bribe that was offered to us by the Nixon administration of millions of dollars to drop our lawsuit. My father said he wasn't interested in money. But, they started with the threats then. And we received a threat. My mom was freaked out. I didn't see it because it was either out of the house or they protected me. And when I read we got this by FOIA just about 5 years ago, maybe a few years ago. I don't know. It's all blurred.
The Freedom of Information Act.
Yes. I asked for the files of my mom, my dad, my sister, and me. They won't release a file about me.
Wow.
Because it's current. Not one file.
Oh, because it's still open. Yeah, I heard that they'll do that.
I'm still an activist and troublemaker. Okay, so, but my mother, we got one thing, and it was what she sent to the FBI to protect us, which is tying in with what, you asked. My mother sent this scary, threatening note, typewritten, talking about my sister and her BF. Who says BF? Meaning boyfriend. Who says that except someone who's sexually weird? And so I'm looking at this. I receive it from the FOIA lawyer. I'm looking at it. I got chills. I had to put it away. I put it away for like a week. I read it again. I got post-traumatic stress crazed all over. I finally got through it. I called Mike Kuzma up, who's a phenomenal FOIA guy if you need one. And he said, and I said to him, I said, you know, Mike, I think that the FBI wrote this threat. And he said, it's understood, Laurel. And they sent that. And when I looked at the BF on it, and the horror stories that we've heard about J. Edgar Hoover, he was screwed up, that dude. He wrote that note with the BF thing in it. I mean, who writes BF? Anyhow.
J. Edgar Hoover was, you know, head of the FBI at that time, if I'm correct.
He founded the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and he was the longest running federal director, FBI director ever. He was king, and he had his private army, which was Cointelpro.
Exactly, yeah. I was about to mention that. He headed Cointelpro.
And so, you know, and they would pull in people from the Army intelligence, Navy intelligence, FBI. They had special teams to do special work. Wow. So at Kent State, they had all of those people there. And it was known as a cluster. It's a technical term. It's when you have a lot of forces, a lot of military forces, a military technical term. You have a lot of military forces all converging, and no one knows who's boss. So they're all fighting for turf. That's what happened at Kent State too. That's the backdrop.
Wow, I was unaware of that. And I was unaware of that technical term, where that came from.
I learned that from a forensic expert. He said, Laurel, this was a cluster. I said, well, yeah. He says, no, it's an actual military technical term. You got to put a little asterisk in the part.
This has been like some heavy stuff, but I think it needed to be said. People need to be aware of what's going on in the background.
I want to protect protesters, whatever I can do. When I was watching Occupation, and I was watching all the FBI stuff that they spying and all that, they got caught red-handed doing exactly what they did to Kent State people, what they did to all of us back in our youth. You know, they wanted everyone to believe that any letter that you received in your mailbox, they didn't have an email back then, any letter that you received in your mailbox, the FBI is looked at it before you got it. You know, and there was that chilling effect. Everyone, I mean, a lot of people had their doors knocked on by FBI people, and then their parents would come out and say, "What are you doing? Why is the FBI coming here?" You know, and they were wrong because the FBI showed up. I mean, and it hasn't changed. Hasn't changed. There's the good FBI. It might be like 3 characters. And then there's the rest of them, you know?
They're trying to, I guess, do image control for public relations.
Well, I mean, they have Mueller now, and you know, well, you know, he's never going to be saving me, that man. I don't, you know, I actually believe that he's setting up obstruction of justice case, cat and mouse with the team in the White House right now. And I applaud it, but I'm never a fan of the FBI because they're the ones that really made it happen that my sister died.
And they continue to do exactly what they did to your sister.
They've never had their hands slapped. They've been applauded. And it goes on today. And at Kent State University, they're very invested in making sure that this story never gets out either, because it is Kent State University. People forget that. It's a government organization. That place was a government CIA vetting site since the 50s. Students going there, do you want to join the CIA? You can have a wonderful career. That was Kent State University since the 50s.
Yeah, that was another thing I was unaware of. I didn't know it was a recruiting ground. I've heard rumors that they recruit on universities, but I didn't know that there would be specific universities that they target like more. more so.
Yeah, there's this guy Haskell, who is a professor. He worked at the CIA and at Kent State University. He was their guy, and he would like check out people. And if you look on my page at Facebook, I have an album called "The Creators of the Kent State Massacre," and those people are pictured there. It was the Huston Plan, and that came out yesterday with Bob Woodward speaking at Kent State last night. And he revealed that he didn't say the FBI was involved. He just said the military. He didn't go as far to say Cointelpro. I guess he wants to save his skin. And I don't, you know, he's old, and I can appreciate that he doesn't want to get shot and killed.
Or like maybe lose his pension. That might be it too.
I don't think he has any problem losing any money or any kind of position in that regard. He's too old at this point. He's fine. But being able to continue breathing is the issue for him if he reveals too much.
Okay.
He could have a heart attack and we wouldn't know what was the cause of that heart attack if he were to say the wrong thing. I mean, this is how this works. I don't want that to happen. I don't want to even cast dispersions on. I mean, not interested in that. But I noticed he was careful with the words that he used. He didn't go as far to say Cointelpro because he likes his life now.
Very good point.
I've got nothing to lose.
Do you think that's the advice that you might give to activists who are very passionate about any given cause or just the movement in general?
What advice would that be? What kind of advice are you saying?
The advice of you have to be prepared to not have anything to lose so you can win what you're trying to fight for.
I think that this is a very personal decision. You know, a lot of people have children. I don't have kids. Kent State hurt me. Everyone has to make that decision for themselves. And I wouldn't want to have anyone base their decision on something I said like this. They need to do it for themselves because it's personal. You know, it's life and death when you protest.
Yeah, the personal is political and the political is personal.
And they're getting away with everything. And so you have to think about that. Would my killing be worth anything? I mean, here Allison, you know, she laid her life on the line. I really believe that she knew that that was an option and she was willing to do it. So if you're in a situation you were protesting and it becomes very dangerous, you have to really consider, if you were to die, would it be worth it? Mm-hmm. You know, is it going to make any kind of statement? Will other people be able to know what the purpose was of your dying? Because right now they are very interested in making sure that no one even knows why, like my sister Allison died. She said flowers are better than bullets less than 24 hours before they killed her. She said, the whole quote is, "What's the matter with peace? Flowers are better than bullets." And she said that to an Ohio National Guardsman's superior who had a flower. The Ohio National Guardsman had a flower in his gun and it got ripped out by the superior. He smashed it on the ground and she came in and she said very forcefully, "What's the matter with peace? Flowers are better than bullets." And the flowers are better than bullets is on her gravestones. Mm-hmm. But do many people know that? The only reason why they seem to know it is because we're putting it out there, because the government doesn't want any association of my sister with a platitude like that, which is so important. And it's how I live my life, and many of us do. Flowers are better than bullets. I'll plant a flower any day over, you know, having a bullet around.
They also don't want to reinforce the image that the people who they slaughtered were conducting non-violent protest.
And they were good people. Now, my sister had some cinders in her pockets because she was throwing stones. But we have to remind everyone that she was 343 feet from her shooters. She really didn't have that kind of arm where she could make any kind of, hurt happen from throwing a tiny rock or whatever. And when people came after her, when these military people came after her with bayonets and threatening to shoot and whatever, what's she supposed to do? Just take it? So she did fight back. And so it's not nonviolent protest. I support nonviolent protest. I support my sister. She did what she...
But self-defense, that still coincides with nonviolence in a way, because you have to draw a line to live your life. You have to protect your life.
It's a slippery slope. It was covered in all the newspapers how she had stones in her pockets. And so my parents said, why didn't they throw stones at her? It was really unmatched.
Yeah. It's the same argument that they do to Palestinian protesters with the bullets versus the rocks, like all the time. Yeah, same story.
And that just makes my heart really weep. The Palestinian situation is so hard, and it's very challenging. And the powers that be are supporting all the wrong elements, and those people are just living ducks, just sitting there, sitting ducks. And I find it, I actually ran into Naftali Bennett at the airport. He's in the Knesset in Israel. He's like second command, or at least he was, to Bibi. I was sitting at the San Francisco airport, my flight was waylaid. He was on the same flight. He came and sat down next to me with his person who was playing with an Israeli passport. And
that was a coincidence.
Yeah, and I'm sitting there and I said, so you guys from Israel? And they're like, oh yes, how did you know first? I said, well, the passport. And he goes, oh, okay. And he says, yes, I'm in the Knesset, like I'm hot stuff, I said, really? And he mumbles his name, and I didn't recognize it at that time, but he's like a real power broker in Israel. And he said things like, he would shoot an Arab, no problem. He would have no problem with that. And so I'm sitting there, we're talking and this and that, and I tell him about Kent State, my sister. I give him my card. and then I said, I'm a Jewish girl, and so I'm Jewish American, so I have, I understand kind of a little bit what's going on. But I have one problem, and that's, the women and children in Gaza, and what's going on there, and the lack of electricity and water and all that stuff. And those poor little children, what do those children do? And he says, those children are terrorists.
Okay.
So I stood up at the airport, San Francisco airport, and at the top of my voice, I said, are you telling me that Palestinian children are terrorists? And he was like, and he ran away with his person.
Yeah, definitely they shy away from public shaming. Yes.
Every time. His turf. I was lucky. If I had done that in Israel, oh my God, but I won't go to Israel. It's a war state. I don't go to war states.
To see if I can open this up to questions.
Sure.
So if anyone has any questions for this episode, so just take the floor.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
So I just want to put a little fly in the ointment here. When people say that they don't go to war states and they're living in one, the U.S. is a white supremacist colonial settler state founded on genocide, theft, slavery, rape, and some more stuff, ongoing violence against the indigenous population. So think about that when you say, I don't go to war states.
Well, I'd rather amend my comment. It was, I don't travel and spend my money traveling to go to war countries. I that's where I was saying that. I won't spend my extra money to travel to a place like Israel. I know
But you'll live in one.
I have to live is here. I'm an American, and this is where I live. And I think I paid the price, I gotta say. You know, they got my sister, okay?
Right. I'm going to get off the call now because you're offending me.
Okay. Sorry about that, to both parties. So if anyone else wants to ask any questions.
Well, maybe I responded badly there, but, I can't be responsible for what the American government is doing. I'm just one person here. I can't. I misspoke by saying I don't travel to war states, and we live in a war state. I understand that. We've been at war almost my entire life. So I work for peace every single day.
I mean, to that note, I know a lot of people are very sensitive with wording. So to just acknowledge that, like, you are here on stolen land is, important to some people. Too many people fail to mention that. I think that may have been one of the prevailing reasons, but I mean, to your defense, I mean, you're right. You've already paid the price. You lost a family member. You continue to fight. I mean, people with white privilege are able to, choose to not fight, right? And you chose that even though you lost your sister, you continue to fight. A lot of white allies don't do that because they have the option to opt out, and you haven't opted out. You've stayed the course.
I live on property here that was Native land. I have 5 acres here at the Allison Center for Peace. I revere my Native colleagues. We're all one as far as I'm concerned. What the government has done in the past, there was a massacre that wasn't that far from here. It was the Mendocino Massacre. And it was the worst in probably Native history. Happened very close to here. And it's kind of unusual that I live here as a massacre survivor. So, maybe it's because I'm supposed to look at this in this lifetime. But you can't just, I mean, what am I supposed to do? Not live? Because, I'm white, and because, of what all the white supremacy has done to America. I do understand that, there's sensitivity, but the offense that was taken, I think, was wrong. It wasn't personal, my response.
So again, I apologize to both parties.
I understand,
Yeah.
There's a lot of touchiness going on. And I think instead of splitting hairs, what we can do that is very helpful to people is to come together and find our commonality and see where, how we can work together for peace and harmony, instead of like, well, you're different than me and we're standing over here and you're there. And that never leads to anything good. And the reason why I bring this up is because this was my sister's message.
Yeah.
My sister wanted peace. She was against war. She stood against peace, and she got gunned down by military bullets, war bullets. And she has a different approach to things than violence. And when I say she, it's her energy, her spirit still is among us, very much so. And she's inspiring many, many people around the world. My sister is amazing. She still lives. And her way is not about finding differences. It's about finding commonality. How can we come together? That's the only way we're going to ever get anything done here, that we're going to ever make any progress. We must find commonality and affinity and work together. And if you find things that are repelling and destructive and don't help with commonality, well, then we put that on another level if we can. And if you can't, well, then that's a deal breaker. But to focus on all the things about how bad it is and how it's getting worse and how we're all different and how it's all split and how it only makes it worse. It doesn't pave the road or get the ground ready for peace in any way, shape, or form. And so that's where I go. I want to get the ground ready for peace. And truth is one of the ways to do it. That's why I founded the Kent State Truth Tribunal. Truth matters. Truth can bring us to peace. It won't lead to division ever. Truth is not about division. It's about bringing people together. It's about love. It's about harmony and finding, and when we know truth, we heal. That's another thing. When we go on this path where we look toward other human beings as our friends and we're all together in this, we're all one, when we do that, we heal. And that's the hidden, they don't want us to heal. But we have to get on with our healing.
Yeah, I was going to mention that since, you came through the new left, you might be familiar that people describe the current left as the new left. But after the new left, we have issues of what's known as balkanization. We've split it up so many times under so many sub platform issues, and we're infighting all the time. In the meantime, people have argued that Cointelpro technically hasn't stopped, and it has continued. And
there's an article that came out about that 2 weeks ago about how Cointelpro is still very much alive. And it was only a recommendation that they take it out, and you know how it is with these recommendations. It only matters to them when a recommendation is made. If a recommendation, it can be broken, that's fine. If like right now, the recommendation is that you can't indict a sitting president. That's a recommendation. It's not a law. But Congress is saying, oh, well, that's very important. If they didn't say that was an important recommendation, it would fall. It's just perception.
But that's my point. So since healing is part of the process, if the new left remains disunified, then, Cointelpro operations can run amok and continue to set us off course, because we're so infighting. Yeah, we're so infighting that we're doing their work for them.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right about that. Here's the deal. Oh, it will most likely take some sort of event. Usually there's an event that happens and people are called together. And if there's not an event to bring commonality, to bring people of people just don't do it unless money's involved. So, I hate to say it, but I think we have to have an event to create solidarity. Mm-hmm. I want to be wrong, because usually these events are terrible.
I see. I've never thought of it that way.
People get motivated by things that happen. And if it's not happening to them, they don't care.
Like a reactionary state.
Well, we are very much. And now with social media, it's seconds. It's like you just get it coming like fire hose. And so you're always reacting. And I limit at this point as much as I can. I have to stay abreast because of my cause. But I try to weed out the horrible sources, and it's like I've always felt, and I hate to say this, but maybe that's what happens with my sister. The truth will be known about her when the next time there's a protester killed. And that's horrible. But people are just unmoved. They have their lives, they have their families, they have their jobs, and they have their hobbies, and unless there's discomfort and it's personal, and so an event has to cut across to make something like that. And that's why, in my youth, we had John F. Kennedy, we had Martin Luther King, Robert, and that set the stage. And oh, by the way, in my book, all Cointelpro actions.
I guess that's also a thing to balance foreseeing, because if an event did happen and it brought people together, then what stops history from rhyming, where they keep picking off movement leaders to the point where the movement is stifled into silence? Because isn't that what happened to the movement after all those leaders were assassinated? It fell off, and it took so many years to come back.
They killed it in all of us. You know, we lost our urge. They killed it. You know, they surrounded our heart with trauma. You know, I remember how much my parents loved John F. Kennedy. I remember coming home in 3rd grade. My mother was ironing at the ironing board. She was a working woman. I don't know what she was doing, but she was weeping. You know, she was home. She was weeping because John F. Kennedy had been killed. It was like personal. It happened to all of us, you know? And he was definitely taken out because of what he was attempting to do, create peace and prosperity and humanity. You know, I mean, he was a Kennedy. Okay, you know, no one's perfect. You know, they're all screwed up. But he actually seemed to have, I mean, he was a rich man too, you know, so he was, you know, very advantaged. But he seemed to care more and have a real heart. Obviously Martin Luther King, I mean, we don't have it, but they got him, and that's what they do. And I think it's sympathy for the devil. The Rolling Stones, that song, they kill our prophets. They do that, and that's one of the lines in it. And to me, Allison is one of those people. And I hope before the day I leave this planet that it is known. You know, I would really like it if we could start trying to get back to peaceful action and coming together and finding commonality and turn off the TV. The word is televisization. And basically, you know, the television decides who becomes our president these days. And that's how it works. So I was listening to Bill Maher, and he was saying Oprah would make a really good, and, you know, I've never really been a huge fan of Oprah. You know, I think she's a very accomplished person and talented and smart and beautiful and the whole thing. But her politics are corporate, and I have a problem with that. And so, but I think she'd be a little more fair than what's going on now, you know, and I think we'd have a little bit more control with her there than what we got now. So if the television can get her in the White House, you know, I'd be inclined, because we have to get someone that people will vote for. And it's the squawk box that gets it. It's the TV. And that creates the candidate now.
The attention through the mass media, through TV, and also paid advertisements on social media.
We really should be actually studying televisization. It's a hard word to say, televisization. It's a science, it's pervasive, it's controlling our whole society, and everyone pretends like it's not a big deal, like we shouldn't even look at it. But the reality is Kent State was one of the first televised events like that. People came home that day. It happened right around 12:20 in the afternoon on the East Coast, you know, East Coast time. And so people came home that day and they learned about it on the TV. And they had been watching all the Vietnam dead bodies coming through, because back then we got to see body bags and all that, and, you know, have that trauma showered on us from TV. And so then this happened, and it really affected everybody because they got it through the TV. Now, they read other things, of course, everything that they could read. Everyone did at that moment. I know everyone did, because everyone was worried for their own skin at that point. But the one that made the difference, the impact, was television.
That's true. Yep.
So that's where I want to actually focus on a little bit. And I think that a lot of people in activism should. I think that we should really have a campaign about it. I think that we have to, you know, inform the masses about it. Don't be controlled by your TV. Back in the old days, we had that. You know, we had like a guy with garbage in, garbage out, you know, and all sorts of stuff. And But I mean, now it's like, oh, but the housewives and all that, it's just comes in and people they just assume it's okay, and it's copacetic because it came through the TV.
I totally feel you on that. Yeah, that needs to be addressed. I think some organizations have dedicated themselves to do that.
And they had a great tactic, and they became the demon. They were demonized. They were hunted down because of that, because they were so correct about it. That's when you know you're right.
That's when you know you're right, because your enemies come after you.
Well, the whole force of the United States government comes after you. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it has definitely been really, really insightful and informative to.
Yeah, anytime you want to do this, I'm up. I'm up for it. We should have a radio show or something.
I do have a podcast, but I was doing this more to inform fellow activists, which may or may not be likely to, support my business venture.
Oh, yeah, that's another thing. Paying the bill is tough these days.
Yeah. But I really wanted to put this out there because of, the anniversary happened yesterday, and also, the whole question about law enforcement repressing protesters is still repeating, as we've seen it with the Venezuelan embassy collective, like Protection Collective. Yeah.
And Occupy. Yeah. And all, I mean, it continues without missing a beat. And they become more militarized. We see them becoming more involved. I mean, this whole Venezuela thing is really a mess, because I mean, those boys really want their coup. They want in DC, they really want their coup, and
they want their coup so badly because of the money from the oil. Yes.
Yeah, obviously. And they want to have control and imperialism. That's what it is. This is empire here, and they're not going to get it. They're not going to get it. And it's really pissing them off, and tough tootie. Tough tootie. It doesn't work all the time. And let's hear you talk about how it didn't work. Let's have big articles about how this didn't work. That's what I'd like to read. They won't give us that. And we're just going to move on, and it's like it never happened. But no, I'd like to know how they failed. I'd love to hear the expose on that.
Exactly. Like how they failed in Iraq.
When was the last time that we could say, oh, they did such a fabulous job? I can't remember one. They do what they want. We're just here. We're little people.
Well, I'm hoping my business venture changes that.
What is that? What is your business venture?
Well, the grand scheme of it is I eventually want it to be a fintech company, which is a financial technology company, but I'm starting from nothing, so I have to take baby steps to educate people on managing their finances and becoming an entrepreneur, but like from a left and progressive perspective.
Oh,
so that
fantastic.
So that way we can funnel the resources and funding back into our movements, as well as gaining an equal footing to, say, like the Notch brothers, because the Notch brothers buy off, like you said, like, police, they buy off politicians, we're in an oligarchy. Then maybe we need to start playing that game. Maybe we need to start, having our lobbyists.
I was thinking about that yesterday, that maybe we need our own. Back in the 60s, when there was protests, there were monitors. There were monitors there where they were like, making sure that everything was staying correct. And it just fell away. And there's never been any real monitors since. I don't know about Occupy, but there's not a real movement toward policing the dissent or demonstrations coming from the left, from the progressives. We have to have our own. That's what I thought of. That's what came up yesterday. It's like, we can't go out unarmed. I mean, I'm not talking about being armed with weapons. Being armed with the law and with a lot of people to say, no, you can't do this, that are, lawyers or whatever that are there, that are on site saying, no, No, I mean, I don't know how else we're going to be able to really have a vibrant opportunity unless we have our own protection. They will not protect us. They will kill us.
I am aware that the National Lawyers Guild tries to make it out to as many protest events as possible,
Right.
but they can't cover everything because their numbers are so low because they're volunteering.
We need this to be a paid position.
Exactly.
People doing this, they do this for their living. They're here to protect us. We have to have our own forces.
Yeah, so
I don't know how else you do that, but I love this idea with this fintech thing. You know, I worked in Silicon Valley for like 20 years at startups.
Oh, awesome.
I was in sales, and it enabled me to be non-corporate my whole life, because I could never, I mean, Allison's sister doesn't get hired. You know, it's how it works. You know, even though I'm white-skinned and I look like, you know, everything's fine, you know, once you hear about Kent State that I'm associated, out the door. Get lost, go away. But at startups, they like innovation, and it's a little different. There's a whole bunch of radicals there anyhow. So I fit right in. And I stayed as long as I could until it became corporatized.
That's good to know. I mean, that's good to also know for activists, because like I've struggled with employment issues too for a variety of reasons. One of them is because of my activism, which has pushed me into becoming an entrepreneur by necessity.
Yes.
But I was unaware that startups were more likely to hire people who were seen as problematic.
In the old days. It's changed now. In the old days, when I was at startups, I was there 20 years ago. I was one of the people that helped bring computers to your desktop. You know, I had my first email account before the web was around, you know, so, and I love that. And I love being on the forefront. And the work that we did at Kent State Truth Tribunal is very forward, you know, with our testimonials, and we're going to try to get search and video. That's digital database. That's way out there stuff.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I relish that. That's where I want to go. But, you know, now startups, it's corporate. And it's like, who fits that bill and who can deliver the best and give the best return on investment. When I was there, it was like we were putting together little, you know, pieces and seeing what fits and with some tape on it, you know, and, you know, a little bit of stapler here and there, you know, and will this machine work, you know, and then we would like create something, and we have to figure out what is this to be used for, you know. So we'd have to figure out the marketing, and I love doing that. But today it's different. It's very different in the creative process. They've really taken the fun out of life. What can I say?
Well, I guess most startups nowadays look for venture funding, like capitalist venture funding. I think that might be why. I know
that's why we need to have left vulture funding. We need to have peace funding.
Yeah.
You know, there's no venture capital group that works on peace. Well, we need to form that. I mean, that's how this works. You can't just sit back and think, oh, well, it's too bad. It's never gonna. We have to do it.
Yeah, we have to roll up our sleeves and get that work done.
Well, we need to amass large amounts of money in order to have the venture fund. And that's, you know, so there's a lot of elements here that are problematic.
Yeah, well, that's one of the reasons why I decided to go the route I did. I mean, I know I can try to make it, but what's a better idea is to bring everyone into it to try to make it together. Because if we can become direct investors, choosing where our portfolio money goes instead of lumping it.
I would love this. I would go. I mean, I don't know much about Bitcoin and all that, and I'm interested though. I mean, I you know, anything that I can do to make it better for the people of America and for my common man and free thinkers and progressives, I'm for.
Thank you so much for your support. And I wholeheartedly support you and the causes that you champion.
Well, I think of me, and, you know, you never know what we could do in the future. I think that you and I are kind of an interesting mix because we're different generations.
Yeah.
But we still have a common perspective. And I've got the history and experience, and not to say that you don't. You have your own. but it's a couple fewer years. You know, I'm 64, and so I would welcome any opportunity for us to find more commonality. And if something goes bump in the night, you should give me a call.
I believe the way to find commonality across class and even across like the different ideologies that are splitting up the left might be, you know, we have to deal with capitalism. We have to use it as a tool. And I think money might do that for us without having to have a traumatic event happen. So I'm hoping this can solve it rather than waiting.
Well, if there's anything I can do, please, you reach out to me and I'll be there. And I want to thank you for reaching out to me yesterday to do this. It takes guts, and it's you're very dedicated, and I appreciate that.
I'll always be dedicated.
Well, maybe that's what we'll do. We'll do the remembering, and we'll also get all of our finances all fixed up.
Yep, that would be. Well, on that note, I guess I'll go ahead and end the stream. It's been such a pleasure to have you on here. Thank you so much.
You helped lift me up. Thank you so much.